Okay, so this week I was lucky enough to attend a BMW demo day, and without having to go to Americade or out to Mid-Ohio to do it. The last two times I was able to drop in or at least pass by a BMW demo day as opposed to trying to demo a bike at a dealer was at Americade, and over some discussion, it came out that BMW was last at Americade 7 years ago, which I found hard to believe. Time flies by so fast, but I was at Americade when they were there, and when they were last there, I should say. And they're going there this year for the first time, obviously, in 7 years. And then also, they were at Mid-Ohio when I was there, when Mid-Ohio races, and KTM was there doing demos also. KTM doesn't seem to have much of a demo schedule this year, but they do seem to have a few trucks, a few sites rolling around, a lot of dirt bike stuff, but some road bike stuff. And BMW is just really kind of awkward with demos, but there was some success this weekend. Things kind of came together well. This video I have really had a hard time putting together audio-wise because I kind of know where I'm going to go with this, but it's such a really short and sweet ride there to get there that I really had trouble thinking about how I was going to flesh it out. So I had to write a few guidelines, and then let me go through this, I guess, in series. First was this whole ticket thing. Again, this is another place that tries to be formal, tries to be organized with the demos, ends up failing badly. I knew this was not going to work out the way that they were trying to set it up because I've seen this kind of thing try to happen before and it didn't happen. They had you go online and sort of buy a ticket. It was really a purchase. It was more like get a ticket for the demo, which was at Cross Country BMW in Metuchen, New Jersey, and this was supposed to give you a time to get there. Now, really, all that happened is it gave you directions, which I think was a good thing. It gave you a good Google map to the site. And let me tell you, this place was a pain in the butt to get to. It's just outside of New York, outside of, it's really not Staten Island, like it said in the announcement. It's more, I guess, Perth Amboy or just north of Trenton. It's maybe 20 miles north of Trenton, northeast. But you have to kind of know, and believe me, you have to know this. Don't go there any other way than taking the turnpike. And then you take 287 for like a mile to get there. It's a pain in the ass if you try to drive up 285 or 295 or driving through the rural New Jersey. That's the worst thing about New Jersey. Mile after mile after mile of stoplights and local neighborhoods and sort of straight roads, and it's just tediously slow. The people are so slow drivers. Every now and then you get somebody who's literally racing to get through the traffic, and you see them weaving back and forth through traffic. But 9 times out of 10, it's painfully slow to drive on these roads in New Jersey. So what happens is 295. If you take it north out of Trenton, it sort of becomes like a 2-lane highway into Route 1, and then it becomes 2 lanes with traffic lights every maybe mile, and then it becomes 2 lanes with traffic lights every half mile, and every quarter mile, and then blah, 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 all the way as you get closer and closer to New York City as things become more dense. And it's just a nightmare to take it up that way, and just really go there, take the turnpike. There's like an exit right there, and you can be there in like 5 minutes off the turnpike. Much better. Second thing is, it's not just a BMW dealership. It is also a a Triumph. They have Ducatis. They have Cowies there, Suzuki's there, and it's really an all-around kind of place. And I don't know why they say it is just a BMW dealership. Plus, there's a big Honda dealership next door, and a Yamaha dealership right down the street, like literally a short walk down the street. It's a huge showroom in 3 parts and 2 levels in the main one, and it was really nice. I actually bought some winter gloves from their BMW section of the upstairs, and got some quotes on a Monster and so forth and all that. It was really nice. Definitely a good place to go check out. And I would certainly say that I had a great time at this demo. I did get there an hour late. I didn't get there, on time like I planned to, because usually these things you have to show up before 9 o'clock, or else the bikes that you want to ride are all gone, by certainly, until 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon if you're lucky. And this is the last day of the demo. It was a 3-day demo. Started Thursday, went Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Luckily, it did not rain. The clouds were threatening. The wind was threatening most of the day, but it did not rain. And I got 3 rides out of the day. And I didn't get there until 10. And it, kind of dragged. There was one woman who was taking all the driver's license and everything, and she kind of dragged things out, was really talking and chatty to everybody in line. But it did go through. We did get through. It wasn't that packed. It wasn't really busy. And I got a ride on the S1000R R, and I got a ride on the S1000R, and those were what I was really looking to get a ride on. Those, I would say the S1000R R has been the bike that I have been trying to get a ride on for quite some time. There's a couple of BMW dealerships near my place, but it has been somewhat awkward to get a ride on them. Let's say they've been less than forthcoming. When I went to Mid-Ohio, it was jam-packed out there, and there was no way I was going to get a ride. So, and then I asked them, and they were like, talk to your dealer, talk to your local dealer about getting a ride. And dealers are not necessarily eager to give out rides on BMWs, at least. A Ducati, I can get a ride on pretty easily from a dealer. Suzuki, maybe, Cowie, and some of the other ones. Just getting a ride from a dealer is really a pain in general, which is why I go to demo rides in the first place. So anyway, finally got everything together, and I got on the S1000R R about 11 o'clock, my first ride of the day. And it's weird, you're sitting there watching people on these bikes, and a lot of guys would get off the bikes and they'll rev them, and after their ride they'll come in and rev them, race them like jackasses. It's amazing the kind of things you see some guys do at these demo rides. Just ride, treat the bikes like complete idiots. They had somebody who had a technical problem with the S1000R they had in line the day before, so they had pulled it out, and they ended up replacing another bike with an S1000R from the showroom floor. Very nice of the guys to provide that bike for the demo out of their own stock. And it was almost a brand new bike, had 600 miles on it, and it was, I have to give these guys a lot of credit for that. Most places will not do that. That's why they have the demo trucks come in, so they don't have to use their own stock. So, let's see what we're going to get to the point here. There's 2 things I really want to talk about, and I think I'm going to use the next 5 minutes or a couple of minutes to talk about the site a little bit more detail. I want to set the stage. As I said, it's a short ride from the New Jersey Turnpike and also the Garden State Parkway to the site of this demo, and it's maybe a 5-minute ride on local roads between the Turnpike and also between the Garden State Parkway. So the problem is it's a very sleepy kind of town, Metuchen or whatever it is. It's like one of those old colonial towns almost. In New Jersey. New Jersey's a lot of towns like this, and where there's a decent center, somewhat 18th, 19th century kind of place. And it's Main Street with houses, a lot of houses, a lot of big houses, a lot of fancy old houses, and very nice place. And normally these kind of places have a lot of old people and a lot of cops running around them. So they're not the kind of places you want to even think about going for a demo ride on a sport bike. But that's exactly the neighborhood that this place was in. So what we ended up doing, a lot of the ride was through an industrial park that was not too far from the dealership. So we spent, I would say, about half the time riding through this industrial park, a couple of miles on local roads, very flat, and then some part of it on to 287. And this is the thing. Very rarely do you get to go on a ride on the highway, on these demo rides that are in these local dealerships and not at a major site like Americade or Daytona. Almost never do they actually take you out on the highway, okay? We got to go on this demo, not just on the S1000R and RR and all the other bikes that BMW had, the adventure bikes and the R9T and stuff like that. But we also got to ride on 287 for about 5 miles. And that was interesting in and of itself. It certainly played into the ride in certain ways which I hadn't expected, which I definitely want to talk about, which is why this video is going to be a little bit longer than my other bike videos, but also not quite as long as my last video when I talked about Ducati versus Yamaha. So let me get to the point here. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is the crowd, okay? Now this place was Saturday, it was a decent day to ride, although the weather was a little bit threatening in time, certainly. And as I said, it's not just a BMW dealership, it also has most of other Japanese manufacturers. It doesn't have Aprilia, but it did have Ducati. Doesn't have KTM, for instance, but it did have Triumph. So you saw a lot of different bikes there at the demo, and this was not some place where you didn't have guys with money rolling in. There were a lot of guys rolling there with tricked up cars. There were a lot of guys rolling in there with nice Infinitis and Porsches and Audis and things like that. This is a BMW dealership, so to a degree there were going to be people there with money. It wasn't a low baller, low budget kind of place, okay? So the guys come in there and they're riding their bikes also come in there. Bunch of guys on concourses came in, bunch of guys on Gixxers, and all around the front, as you'll see in the pictures, I had there were photos of different bikes there from the dealership, Ducatis, S1000R R, things like that, and there were a mix of the dealership's bikes plus people who had ridden up and parked their bikes there. So it wasn't like they were all the dealership bikes or all the guys riding in, but you saw a wide variety of bikes, okay, but over time a pattern started to emerge, okay? There would be the occasional Honda, the occasional CBR 1000RR, for instance. There would be the occasional CBR 250R. There would be the occasional Yamaha FC 750 throwback Genesis bike, right? You'd see the occasional bike from a wide variety of different types of bikes. There was a couple of guys that rolled in there in RSV4s. There were just, samplings of different types of bikes. But far clearer as a presence there was the S1000RR, okay? I would say about a third of the bikes there were S1000RRs. Guys coming in and going, dropping in. A couple of them getting some work done, but a lot of guys just dropping in for the show. Some guys coming in, eating a free hot dog or two, talking with their friends and leaving and so forth. A lot of S1000RRs were there, and some R1s, but not the new R1. Usually it was the older R1, okay? Like the 2005, there was a guy there with the 60th anniversary 2005 R1. There were some guys there with the 2002 to 2006 maybe. I didn't see any of the intermediates like the 2007 to 2013, and I didn't see one of the new 2015, 16, 17 R1, the one with slide control. Not a single one. And I was there from 9:30, 10 o'clock until 4:30 when I took my last ride and got out of there. I didn't see a single new R1 there. In the showroom, they had a 10R, brand new. They had a Busa, they had a ZX14R, they had a bunch of Triumphs, Ducatis, left and right. There were some guys that came there to demo that were riding. 1199s and 899s and 959s and the occasional 1299. So there were maybe 5 or 6 different Ducati Panigales that came in there. Not a single guy on a monster. Okay, a guy in an FC10 was there. Not many street fighters, but some of the Yamahas. A couple of guys in R6, I think maybe 1 or 2 guys in R6s the entire time I was there. But the Gixxer crowd and the R1 crowd were almost all on the old Gixxers and the old R1, okay? You didn't see anything new in terms of the Gixxers or R1 there the entire day. That whole day, I didn't see anything. The only new bikes I saw that were sport bikes were the 2 Aprilias, okay, and the S1000RR. And there were at least 10, well, sorry, and the Panigales. Okay, there were at least 10 S1000RRs and maybe 5 Panigales there the whole time I was there. So here's the thing. If there's one thing that you saw when you were at this demo, you saw the S1000RR being ridden by a lot of guys. Young guys, not older guys. Certainly there were the older BMW crowd was represented. There were guys there riding adventure bikes. There were guys there interested in the bikes with spoke wheels, things like that. There were the guys there who were interested in the nineT, the boxer engine, the trellis frame, the K, the G, the GSs. There were guys there who were interested in those bikes too. Okay, it was a mix of the older and younger crowds. Well represented bike riders, certainly guys, Europeans, Americans, guys who cut across all the grains of motorcycling. It was probably one of the better crowds that I've seen in that regard. And they had a wide variety of bikes. They had a lot of the bigger adventure bikes, the bigger cruisers, the smaller bikes, the R9T, which I think is more of an attempt to go back to a more smaller sort of thumper type bike, let's say. And of course, they had 2 S1000RRs, and they had at least one of the S1000R, okay? But everyone was interested in the S1000R. There was some interest in the S1000R. There was some interest in the R9T, and there was a fair amount of interest in the adventure bikes. A lot of which had shaft drive, The R9T has shaft drive and some other things. They have different types of body fittings, so forth and so on. But let's put it to you, I want to say this clearly. There was no doubt that there was a significant and strong S1000RR fan base at that demo site, at that dealer that day. And I found out why when I took my first ride on the S1000RR, okay? That bike is badass shit. I have ridden a lot of sport bikes. I can tell you one thing, that bike is almost perfect. I'd almost given up on the whole idea of buying another sport bike. I was thinking about a monster. I was thinking seriously about a monster. I was pricing monsters, and then I took a ride on this bike, and I was like, whoa, this is exactly why I like to ride sport bikes. This bike is fucking awesome. I gotta tell you right now, they had the throttling almost perfect. It had been a long, long time since I've opened the throttle at like 3,000 or 4,000 RPM and heard the airbox actually, I don't know if a lot of people have never heard that because of the way that the primary and secondary throttles open now. They don't open that much at low RPMs. On the S1000R, no problem. You turn the throttle, it doesn't matter what RPM it is, opens wide open, and you can hear the air just rattling around in there. Almost perfect. It didn't have quite the low end of a 14R or a Busa. It wasn't quite electric motor-like, but it still had plenty of power. And on that demo ride, I found myself not taking that bike over 4,000 RPM for the first 5 minutes. because it had that much low end power. I didn't need to, okay? I was getting used to the rest of the bike. I had a little problem with the ABS. The guy had the first couple of stoplights we were at, I was fiddling with that, and I ended up going to the lead guy who was right in front of me and asked him what was going with the ABS warning light, and he was like, turn the bike off, turn it back on, it should be okay. I said, yeah, we had to do a reset of yours, no problem. From there on, it was fine. The turn signal was a little lower than I really was comfortable with, and it's like the controls had been rotated a little bit too far down, so I was dealing with that. The clutch was late in engagement, so I was dealing with that. It was like the last couple of millimeters of throw, the clutch would suddenly, not like on off, but it would come in late in the engagement, so I was dealing with that. And in general, there were a few little things like that I was getting used to. But the bike had much more space than the Panigale. It wasn't like this big, comfortable leisure bike, like some people have said. I think it was much more of a normal bike. I would say it matched the Panigale's dimensions, the 1199 Panigale's dimensions very well, which I think is slightly more space, slightly more rider room than the 959, but not a lot more that is so much different. The pegs were not high at all. I would say they were modestly placed. Certainly they were not as high as the R1's pegs. Certainly the handlebars were not uncomfortably low. I didn't find myself having a strain to hold my head up or anything like that. No problem with that whatsoever. The clutch loading was not very high at all. I would say no more than a 750, and I started to get this feeling, and then things started kind of resonating, at that point. This bike is a lot like a 750. Very much like a 750, but it has abundance of power. It certainly had plenty of power. Now, within maybe the first 10 minutes of the demo ride, I was starting to open it up more, and I got up to like 8,000 RPM a couple times, things like that. But it wasn't like I did it because I needed to. I did it because it was fun. I was having a blast on that bike halfway through that ride. It was easy to turn it left and right. The steering was nice and calm. I guess it has a steering damper on it, certainly. This one has the semi-active suspension, and it's sold to the S1000R R, by the way. I'll get to it later. But this one definitely had the semi-active suspension. I had it in sport mode. The ABS was on. Everything was cool. It was just like an R6 almost. Like an R6. It was so easy to turn. It wasn't like dynamically unstable like the R6 actually is. But also you didn't have the feeling that you were sitting on top of the bike like you would on an R6. You sat in the bike, it was right there, but it was comfortable. It was so much enjoyment to ride it. I was like, how can anyone not like this bike? The throttling is awesome, almost perfect. The power is good. It revs nicely, it turns nicely, it handles nicely, it brakes nicely, it has plenty of power, and you just ride it and have fun. You don't have to sweat a lot of the shit that you have to sweat on other bikes. Now, like the Panigale, where you have to keep bumping the throttle to keep the revs up when you want to change gears or go around turns. Make sure the engine doesn't stutter out on you while it's going around the turns. No funkiness with the clutch. Or it comes in and out all of a sudden like the 859, and you have to worry about installing it. It has low end power, so you don't have to worry about the thing bogging and shuddering on you like the old R1 did. There's no throttle lag. There's no issues with the fueling. It doesn't surge. It doesn't do anything wrong. Nothing. It was perfect. Almost perfect. Except it maybe, possibly, could have had a little bit more low end power. Maybe. That's about it. The only thing I could see that was wrong with it. Even this model, which was in gray and black, didn't look as ugly as the normal, S1000R does with those shark fin kind of things on the side, and I really like those. But they were muted colors on this bike. It was nice. It was attractive. It was awesome to handle, awesome riding it, and awesome handling it. The brakes, it was just a wonderful sport bike. I could not think in my entire memory of riding sport bikes ever having ridden a better sport bike than this. I was having a hard time in my entire riding history thinking of having ridden a better motorcycle than this. Now, the one disadvantage it does have relative to a Monster or any Street Fighter is it doesn't have the wide bars. You still are dealing with clip-ons, you don't have the leverage in the handlebars. But it didn't need it. It handled perfectly well without it. It was probably about, if you were going to say to somebody, I know that nakeds and everything and look like they're comfortable and easy to ride, and super sports look like they're uncomfortable and everything, but try the S1000RR first and then tell me what you think then. This is the bike that you would point people to who have never ridden a super sport or a sport bike or a leader bike before and say try it. It wasn't brutally aggressive off idle. It didn't have any issues whatsoever. It was a wonderful, wonderful bike. And I was simply floored by how good it was. I really was. Plus, it's not that expensive compared to the Panigale. It's not much more expensive than the R1S, okay? The new Gixxer's coming out. Suzuki has 3 different models, just like Yamaha does, with the top of the line Gixxer 1000RR priced at or higher than the S1000RR. I just don't see how this bike can't compete with new technology, except maybe it doesn't have slide control. Okay, fine. And I do have a story to tell about the bike, which I'll get to in a little bit. Let me check my time here. And this bike is, if 4 years ago, this bike, what else beat it? I can understand why it was the top line bike, when it first came out. It's awesome. It is simply an awesome motorcycle. Now, I haven't ridden the Aprilia RSV4 yet. I haven't ridden the Tuono yet. I have not ridden the Super Duke. And I haven't ridden the new Gixxer. So there's certain things, I haven't ridden the 1299. There's certain things that I can't be an absolutist about it, okay? I can see no need, okay? I would be happy with this bike. I would be happy. There's a part of my mind that might say, oh yeah, but you should try these other bikes. But I can also say, I've ridden enough other bikes to know this is a damn good bike, and I would be happy with it, okay? And I want to leave it there, and that's kind of what I was afraid I was going to do. But I have to talk about the S1000R and the R19 also. So we have to do this. I want to also say that this bike, when we went on the highway ride, was the only bike of the 3 that I felt comfortable on riding it around these exit ramps and onto the highway and stuff, partially because the exit ramp configuration was so weird, but also because I thought it was the best and most neutral handling of the 3 bikes. And I want to talk about that a little bit more, and I'm going to make some more audio here to talk about the S1000R and the R9T directly. Okay, so let's talk just about those 2 bikes. Now, the S1000R is the quote-unquote naked / Street Fighter version of the S1000RR. However, the S1000R that they had there was significantly different than the S1000RR in terms of the way it handled. Now, it didn't have, likewise, it didn't have any throttling issues, just like the S1000R, but it didn't have, on the other hand, it didn't have like a different power band characteristic either. It was very similar in terms of its power band characteristic. The difference, the main difference that I felt was in the brakes. This bike had way more aggressive brakes than the S1000RR that I had ridden, which had normal bite, normal feel in the brakes. And when I got on the S1000RR, I almost threw myself off at once, off over the handlebars, because I took too large a bite of handle of brakes, and I got up on my seat, and I was, I had to really stay in my seat, let's put it that way. That bike had very strong brakes, very aggressive braking, and you had to really be careful not to pop your finger down on that brake, because it would certainly bite that front wheel in a heartbeat. Just slow it right down. And now, I didn't think the riding position was that much better at all. The bars were certainly wider, but I think they were at the same height. And I looked at this before I got on the two bikes. They had the R in front of the RR, and it looked to me like the handlebars were the same height. Obviously, the risers, the triple clamps and the mounting positions are not the same, but the handlebars were very similar. And I didn't think that there was much of a disadvantage or advantage in the RR versus the S1000R. What I did note is not having the windscreen affected the steering, not having, maybe, I don't know, it doesn't have a steering damper or something I would look at, and also the wider bars, it gave it more steering leverage than I needed. And I felt that bike was somewhat less controllable and enjoyable to ride, because it almost had too much leverage. The front end was almost too easy to steer. And combine that with the brakes, and when you're on those brakes, they're very strong, and you're trying not to oversteer the bike while braking and also holding yourself up from braking at the same time. It got a little bit busy on that bike. I got to the point where I really didn't like it very quickly. The clutch was a normal clutch engagement as opposed to this late clutch engagement on the S1000RR. And since I was used to the later clutch engagement, I found myself quickly having to adjust to the earlier clutch engagement, much earlier clutch engagement on the R, combined with, as I said, the wider handlebars, the much more serious brakes, and the power of that bike. I mean, it's not a slow bike. And the throttle response, there's no throttle delay to help you. So it does get to be an intense ride on that bike. And I can only say, if that's what you like, that's fine. If you don't necessarily like that or feel comfortable with that, it's a problem. The one thing I did like was, the control position was better. And another problem I had with the S1000R was somebody left the heating on the grips, and it rapidly got to the point where it was burning my hand, through a pair of gloves on the grips. And luckily the guys had talked about this in the pre-ride, and they showed you how to cut it off. And I had to go make sure it was cut off twice, because it was damn hot. It was almost too hot to hold the bars, and that would have been a real problem on a motorcycle at 40 miles an hour. And so that was one thing. I didn't like the mirrors on either one. I think the mirrors are bullshit. You can only see like 2 inches of stuff behind you in the mirrors, and that's a whole other problem for another day in general on motorcycles. But I like the S1000RR more than I like the S1000R. Now I can understand the S1000R has its appeal. I don't know if there's a huge price difference. I doubt that there is, but I really don't see why anybody would buy the Naked when they can get the S1000RR. It's a better bike. It's the kind of bike you'd want to have on the highway, and it handles perfectly well riding it around town at low speeds. And so one of the problems we had when we went on a demo ride is the latter half of the demo ride, it curves around and it makes this big sweeping curve that it's like you're making a turn from one highway to another on the off ramp, and there's another off ramp from a parallel highway that comes in from your right, and then you go around a turn and it splits 3 ways. There's a section where it goes straight, a section goes right, and a section goes left. Again, this negotiation part, it went on for about 270 degrees, and the S1000RR was clearly the bike I felt comfortable riding through that section of turn on. The S1000R just didn't quite turn as well. For some reason, it just didn't feel right in the turns. I'm not sure what was going on, but there's really a problem for me when the bars are too wide, because your hands are moving too much. You know, the wider the bars are, the more your hands move back and forth when you're steering the bike, when you're counter steering everything. And I just really don't like it when I have to move my hand 3 inches, you know, in a turn. It kind of throws off my balance, it throws off the weighting on the bars, and it throws off my steering. So I really didn't enjoy having the wider bars. I would have been happier if they were narrower, more like a regular Super Sport. And certainly on the S1000R, they're not that narrow. That is a problem. And you know, it just wasn't the kind of thing I was happy about. So the next thing I rode was the nineT, which I'm only going to say a few words about. I can see where it comes from. It's more like a throwback to the older, like the R80 boxers and everything. I guess it's got the air/water oil cooled boxer engine. This is the first time I've ever ridden a boxer, and I did not like it. I could see its appeal though to an older crowd, a classic BMW crowd, a cruisers type crowd, thumper type crowd. The big problem I had with it was you off idle, you rev it, and the thing wants to, you know, turn the bike to the right. It's the weirdest thing. It's like somebody standing next to you pushing the bike on the left side, and but once you start rolling, that tendency tends to lessen. Okay, but you're still thinking it might happen, you know, at the wrong time when you gun the bike or something like that. But it doesn't really happen. Maybe you can automatically or instinctively correct for it. It just seems like it's going to happen. It's a really disconcerting feeling. Plus, the bike was very much like you know, like a FJ 1300 or something. It really didn't have a lot of power in the midband, and it certainly ran out of breath early. And it was like a tractor. It was okay at low RPM. I mean, it was a motivating factor, and it made the bike move, but it was not like any kind of real, you know, sport bike motor at all. And it's wide. Those big cylinder heads are big and wide. The bike looks okay, but it's got a shaft drive, and that's fine. And that's really where I could see the niche for this bike, is for people who just want something to cruise on that's fairly low maintenance and fairly rugged and reliable. I mean, sure, you could ride the thing, you know, across Europe and stuff, and never have to worry about oil and chain. As long as the drive shaft, the shaft itself doesn't have a problem, it would be fine. You know, but the thing is, the shafts do have problems. They have a different set of problems, and the bike really just has no real motor in it, and it didn't want to go. We were on the highway. I couldn't get it to go over 85 miles an hour, and certainly it didn't feel good riding it fast in sweepers. You know, and the last ride we were riding, it was like almost no traffic, and we were out there flying. We finally got, the guy finally cut loose a little bit, and we're out there flying down the highway, making this big sweeping right-hand turn, and I just couldn't keep up with him. Then a guy behind me, riding the GS 1200, just flew by me, okay? Boom, just almost like pulling a wheelie as he went by me. And he's on the newer water-cooled engine GS bike, not the full adventure, but it's still like a super tenere. Had no problem with the speed, and it was hopeless. I couldn't keep up with him. You know, luckily they ended soon, and I caught. So unfortunately, this is going to be a little over 30 minutes. I think it's already 40 minutes. But let me just say in summary, the place, first of all, the place was surprisingly nice. They had a wide variety of motorcycles there. I don't know if the prices were all that great, but certainly the selection was good, okay? The showroom was very nice. The accoutrements, you know, the clothing, gear, boots, etc., stuff like that, wonderfully wide range for Triumph, BMW, Ducati, everything. They had all the gear there. They had Hondas there too. It was Hondas, and they had every bike there represented very well, from the little 125s up to the 1299 and obviously the S1000R and the monsters and everything. It was really nice place. But I wouldn't say you're going to walk in there and save money. I'd say you're paying for the selection, but the selection is there. I didn't like the location one bit. I just thought that's not where I want to be going shopping for motorcycles. It might be convenient for people in the area, but I wouldn't want to be riding out there again. I honestly wouldn't. I'm just, the only redeeming thing about it is it's just off the turnpike. So fine. You can get there quickly, but you don't want to take the back roads, is kind of what I'm saying. And the back roads are half the fun of riding motorcycles. Getting places and having to take the highway is not why I want to buy a motorcycle. Other than that, I certainly enjoyed the S1000RR ride thoroughly. I certainly have to put that bike up, if not at the very top, certainly near one or two bikes off the very top of the sport bikes that I've ever ridden. I can certainly appreciate the S1000R, but I think that it is at best equivalent to the FC10. Not quite as wacky as the FC9, but certainly really no better than the FC10, although it's probably better looking. I mean, the FC10 is just not a really attractive bike, in my opinion. The S1000R probably has an edge in that regard. And the R9T Pure, I think, I can see that. It has a niche. I can certainly see it. I didn't even bother asking how much it was. I'm sure it's somewhere in the $10,000, $12,000 range. But I can see why they have it. It does okay. It does its job. It extends the boxer line without sacrificing too much in terms of the purity of the sport bike, the old boxer tradition. All in all, it was a wonderful trip, a wonderful experience. It certainly did answer a lot of questions for me, but at the same time, it did make me kind of sad because BMWs are still BMWs, and BMW owners are still BMW owners, and it's still saddening to me to reinforce the notion that BMW makes the best sport bike out there, in addition to their cars and the other bikes that they have, and the popularity, they're the number one selling, number one dealer, manufacturer, blah, blah, blah. And it also makes me sad that the United States of America cannot manufacture anything other than fucking Harley Davidsons, okay? Yet Harley Davidsons are still selling well, and it just is sad to me that we spend so much time and effort and money on imported bikes. And I'm not trying to say that I'm a Trump supporter or something, but you do have to think about this as an American. We spend all this time and money on imported bikes, talking about Yamahas and Kawasaki's and Hondas, which, by the way, I've ridden the CBR 1000RR, and trust me, it is nothing like the S1000R. It's like a big tank compared to the S1000RR. Having ridden, a lot of these different bikes, you just have a issue, okay, with the fact that not one of them is made in the United States. Not one of them is designed here. Even the Buell, which is supposedly a decent bike, the 1190 RX, no, it's going down into auction. They're selling all the tools that make the manufacture of the bikes, everything. Even the 1190, okay, is not even close to competing. I don't care whether it's as good or not. That's not the issue so much as it's not selling. It didn't sell. Nobody wanted to buy that bike. And it was probably a combination of the fact that it was a Buell, and Buell has had a shady history, and the fact that it just doesn't have the reputation and the reviews of these imported bikes. Honda can still sell the CBR 1000RR, which has unchanged since 2012, and still make money selling it. No electronic rider aids at all. Still make money selling it. Buell can't. And they got a brand new design, pretty much a brand new design. It's got a decent engine, nice V4 engine, okay? And they can't sell the damn things. And people are going, I don't want to put money into a Buell. And they're saying, well, why should I buy the Buell when I can get an S1000R for the same money? Or even a Gixxer for the same money, even the old Gixxer for the same money. Why would I want to invest my money in a Buell? And I don't want to be one of these people who sit back and say, because it's an American-made bike and you're an American, and if you don't buy things that are made in the United States, that's not good for your country. I'm not that person, okay? But I can see that argument. I can see it. I have no illusions or delusions about corporate America, okay? But that's one thing to say. It's something else to say, we can't even sell an American-made bike that competes, even on the sales floor, with Japanese or German manufactured motorcycles, while the Germans decide one day, we're gonna compete with the Japanese in manufacturing sport bikes, walk in and make the best fucking sport bike on the market, okay? And every other manufacturer suddenly has to pivot to their bike to compete. Their bike makes more power. Their bike handles better. Their bike has better electronics, okay? Their bike is the bike that people are paying $16,000, $20,000 for, not a Ducati, not an Aprilia, okay? A BMW. And I can understand the Germans and their pride and German phobes and their pride in BMW bikes very easily now. It's an awesome bike. But the truth is, this bike is nothing more than the bike that R1 fans used to rave about, the bike that Gixxer fans raved about for years, and the bike that Ducati fans rave about for years, in the sense that it is a bike that has a large fan base that is rabid about their bikes and supports it and loves them, okay? The BMW the S1000R R is no different than that in terms of sales, in terms of a market. It is, however, not a Ducati. It certainly doesn't have the issues that the Ducati has. It does not have the issues that the Gixxer has, which are not many, but still, okay, has a few. And it definitely does not have the issues that the R1 had. And even the new R1, I still don't think is all that great a bike. I think it's okay. I wouldn't say it's as good as this bike. The only thing that I think makes this bike a question mark in this day and age is not having slide control. And the question is there really a difference between slide control and traction control? In what sense, in what manner, and why does that mean that BMW owners are still high-siding their bikes, that Ducati owners are still high-siding their bikes? Does that mean that R1 owners are not high-siding their bikes? Because I know I've seen videos of people high-siding HP4s on the track, and I've seen videos of people high-siding Panigales. Are there videos out there of people high-siding R1s? I know they're wearing the shit out of those back tires, but are they wrecking them? And if not, that slide control is worth some real money. Right there. And we gotta face it. But maybe it's not just the slide control. Maybe it isn't. Maybe it's also the fact that there's so much throttle lag on the R1, which has way more throttle lag than the BMW, the S1000R. It has way more throttle lag than the Gixxer, at least up until last year, okay? And it certainly has way more throttle lag than the 959 and the 1199. I don't know about the 1299, I haven't ridden it yet. The one thing that I think the R1 may have in its pocket now is that it has been detuned and safety netted to such a large degree that it not only does what a certain writer at a certain website said, in that it makes a noob look like Rossi on the track, okay, is it also keeps said noob from looking like Barry Sheen on the track, okay, and high-siding the living shit out of that bike. And believe me, I know the HP4 and S1000R R have broken enough ankles. I know that, okay? And I know that Panigales have caused enough wrecks, despite all that rider control, all that kind of stuff. You still see people doing it. That's the same problem that Gixxer had before this year's bike. I don't know about the RSV4, but certainly I have not heard yet of anyone high-siding an R1, the newer R1. Okay, that's the one thing I have to say. And I've said this about this topic on an earlier video, is that the dumber and dumber and dumber the riders get, the more the manufacturers have to put the bike on Valium while making it smarter in order for them to ride safely. And the fact of the matter is, it doesn't matter how dumb the riders are. You still got to sell them bikes. You have to. You can't get on your high horse and say, oh, you're too stupid to ride an R6 because you can't get it to start. Okay, because it doesn't start when you hit the starter button. It doesn't start reliably when you hit the starter button. It's the same thing Ducati. Ducati had a problem with this before, where you hit the starter button and then the thing would go for like 15 seconds, and then maybe it would start, right? No, they would always start. They would always start, but they would take a lot of cranks to start as the clutch, the choke, I guess, slowly adjusted, and it would start. Now people expect bikes to start when you hit the starter button, you know. And what you see now with the current Ducatis, the ones that I've demoed at the two experiences, they start right up. Now maybe it's partially because they've been ridden and they're warm and, you know, are hot. Even they've been sitting there for 10 minutes between rides, but they start right up. They don't do that thing like they used to. They start, okay. And the Ducati experience that I was in last, they had 1 ride an hour, very much like the one that I went to back when I went to Mid-Ohio, 1 ride an hour. And I have noticed, without a question, the difference in the starting behavior of the monsters that I rode then and the monsters that I rode last couple of weeks. They start right up now. You hit the throttle, you hit the starter on a Ducati, and it's amazing. I'm like, wow, it's almost like a regular motorcycle now. So when people bitch about the R6, for instance, saying it doesn't start well when you hit the throttle, no, the days when motorcycle manufacturers could say you have to hold the starter and open, you know, and kind of tweak the throttle a little bit, and if you catch it right, it'll start in 10 seconds. Those days are gone. The days are long gone when you had to talk about pulling the clutch and cranking the throttle and whipping it wide open, and cranking the starter, whipping it wide open, but try not to flood it, and occasionally have to push start it or run it down a hill. Those days are long gone. Okay? Now the problem is, no matter how bad the rider is, no matter how stupid they are, they still expect the bike to not fuck up on them. Okay? And one of the things, without a doubt, that I would think they can ask for is not to high side on them. I don't know how. I don't know how. You can make it high side proof, but you can certainly make it harder to high side, especially when the bike has 100 horsepower going to the back wheel at 5,000 RPM, especially then 100, 150, 200 horsepower going to the back wheel. There are a lot of things you can do to keep it from high siding simply because there's too much power going to the back wheel. It's very simple. The moment that back wheel starts spinning, you roll back the throttle, the spark advance, you slow down the fuel, and you may not outright cut it, but you certainly back the power down, okay? Slide control is a sophisticated way of doing this. Traction control was the first way. Like, you could call it phase one, step one of keeping the bike from high-siding. Slide control is a second level of performance in that regard. And I don't know of anybody else who has slide control than Yamaha. And I don't hear about R1's high-siding. I just don't hear about it. I'm sure it could possibly still happen, but I don't hear about it. I don't see it, okay? And that's the one thing you got to keep in mind. The BMW is a nice bike. Definitely a nice bike. There's no question it is an awesome machine, but it just may not be going in the right direction to compete with the R1. And this may mean, literally, a bifurcation of the sport bike market for serious sport riders who are willing to take the chance of high-siding their bike on the track, which is what the HP4 and the S1000R are certainly are those bikes, okay? And the medium to low performance market, which wants a sport bike, a sporty sport bike for the street, and isn't so much interested in racing it on the track. But when they do race it on the track, they don't want it coming out from under them unnecessarily for no real reason. And part of the thing that's saving said sport bike rider market is they're not willing to take the bike to the extreme lean angles that a real rider would take them. They're much less likely to go in at 60 degrees of lean angle or 55 degrees of lean angle and try to make a corner. They're more likely to go in maybe 35, maybe 40, 45 degrees of lean angle and hope they don't drop a load at the point of hitting the apex. So that's actually helping. That's helping them and helping motorcycle manufacturers to keep these bikes on two wheels. Is the lesser riders are much more willing to rely on the electronics instead of dialing them off, turning off the ABS and turning off the traction control. They're much less likely to get themselves into situations where they're going to high side than the so-called expert rider who says the electronics are in the way, they're a problem, I want them gone. And on top of that, the expert rider who does high side at that point is a lot less likely to film it and put it on YouTube. Okay? And then he's much less likely to bitch about it. While I think we're reaching this point where the lesser experienced riders are less sophisticated, less knowledgeable, less willing to admit their own mistakes and their own faults, expect the manufacturer to babysit them the entire time, and they're more likely to complain about things like that, like the front wheel locking up and dumping the bike, or the rear wheel sliding out and they're high siding. And those videos, I have no doubt, will have no problem showing up on YouTube when they happen. That's the one thing you got to keep in mind. You may have to be signing a certain waiver if you buy the S1000RR or even the Panigale, okay, that you would not necessarily have to sign. I'm not saying you wouldn't, but it's not as clear that you would have to sign it if you were to buy an R1S or possibly the new Gixxer or the RSV4. Now, the RSV4 doesn't have slide control, so we'll find out. And certainly the ZX10R is without question a track bike. They made a clear statement. This is a track bike with the 10R. There will be no goofing around with that concept. If you buy this bike, you are buying it to ride on the track, and you are buying it with the understanding that it will be up to you to keep off your... Anyway, so some clear bifurcation in the market to track-oriented sport bikes versus street-oriented sport bikes, to expert riders versus intermediates or mixed-use riders, or even non-track use, okay? And certainly something to keep in mind when you're buying a bike, something to keep in mind when you're riding a bike, and as always, a shout out to my arch enemy 650 Ebe, Something to keep in mind when you're racing the fucking motorcycle at 185 miles an hour on Ohio highways. Over and out.